This is a lightning teaching session, which I was asked to do by Susie at West Mid, because I know it's happening locally there and it's actually going really well there. And the idea is that we spend only kind of 15 to 20 minutes focusing on a topic. There's only 5 slides, which I've found challenging. Anyone that knows me knows I like to talk. But essentially, we decided to pick the voice of the child in safeguarding because we've put together this week of training for you this week, fairly last minute actually, because everyone's kind of adapting fairly rapidly in this kind of post-COVID world that we're not quite post-COVID, but while during the COVID pandemic. And we were originally supposed to do an RSM day on safeguarding, which was we put together over months. We've had to cancel. So a lot of the speakers this week have been drafted in from that programme. So we're super excited that a lot of them agreed. And the reason I've picked Voice of the Child is I feel really passionately, as the Sarah Boutros, who's helped me pull this programme together, the Voice of the Child should really underpin everything we do in safeguarding, and it is often something that is missing. Which is quite frustrating given that we're paediatricians and advocates. So we picked Voice of the Child because we want you during this week to really think about, during the themes that we're talking about, what life is really like for young people. We're going to be talking about contextual safeguarding today, thinking about what life is like for adolescents, vulnerable adolescents. We're going to be talking about sexual abuse this week. What's life like for a child that has suffered acute sexual assault or even chronic? And so I looked at the curriculum, and we're on this new curriculum, which I actually am quite a fan of. And I looked at safeguarding at level 1, and it looked at promoting us as professionals about safeguarding children and raising concerns, but also looking at the long-term impact of adverse childhood experiences. I know Sweta yesterday touched upon ACEs. And so for me, the interaction we have with young people who are having child protection medicals, or who we're seeing in maybe in a neglect setting, what life is really like for them underpins what we do. So I've only put a level 1 outcome, but I would argue very strongly that this theme transcends all levels, and it's something that we should be really passionate about as paediatricians, and we should be asking ourselves what life is like for young people and children. So I've put in quite a long quote here. I'm going to have to move this a little bit just to have a little look, because I really want us to think about our role. So the UN Convention of Rights of the Child places huge emphasis and importance to the wishes and feelings of children in any decision made about their lives. This can become quite tricky once we talk about child protection and safeguarding, because legal parameters start becoming in place, and sometimes legal things take over. But I still think that doesn't change the fact that we can really embed what the child feels and what the child has to say. So child protection should be child-centered. It should incorporate what the child does, the voice of the child, in everything we do. Make sure that we as paediatricians are real advocates for children and young people, because we are in an incredibly privileged position. And I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of my child protection training in Camden with Alison Ward, who's consultant paediatrician there. And she is really passionate about the voice of the child. And it's so much so that when you do a child protection medical in Camden and Islington, the voice of the child questions are embedded in your pro forma. And I'm not sure what it's like elsewhere, but for me, it's really stuck with me that we must try and incorporate this in. Before I go any further, I just want to read this quote. And this is from a young person who's been part of the care system. And it said, "I could have gone so far in my life as if I had the opportunity to deal with my abuse as a child. I wish someone would have listened. I seem articulate. Okay, I tick the boxes, so they moved me along. I seemed fine. If I was your child or your niece, how would you find out how I really was? Talk to me like that. Talk to me like you actually care." And for me, that was a really, really powerful quote of what this means to me. Okay, and we're only seeing children in a very specific time point, and I don't think it would be unfair for me to think that we're going to get everything about this young person or your child within a child protection medical. But the mere fact we're probing and we've got professional curiosity and we're going to use that in our report, I think is a good place to start. So if you're a level 1 trainee, really embed this in your practice, and we will then feel like this week we have done a good job at keeping child protection at the forefront during this pandemic. If you're level 2, level 3 trainees, make it part of your report writing. So from the start, you could start by just explaining why you're doing it, for example, a child protection medical, or even seeing a child. And this should be something we're doing all the time in paediatrics. So I'm really passionate about adolescents. particularly vulnerable adolescents. And I know in my adolescent clinic, I make a real point at the beginning about the purpose of the clinic, why we're here, and the fact that everything we're going to be talking about is confidential. And I also tell them that I'm going to speak to the young person on their own. And I make that quite clear that that is what's going to happen. This doesn't always go down well, but most of the time it does, because you frame it at the beginning and you say that we're going to speak to you on your own. And then I reiterate with a young person when I speak to them on their own that what I talk to them is confidential, but I might have to share what we're going to be talking about. And you make it quite clear that the report you're making will be shared with other agencies, particularly in the child protection setting. So that will be social care, GP, and it's at times police, or even education, but all those involved in that young person's. Because I think they need to know, and it needs to be quite clear that you are listening, but you're also feeding in and you're their advocate. For those that are able to, I think it's important to get signed consent, and certainly I know that Camden are very passionate about that. And it just makes it more contractual that you are what your role is and what you are going to do with the young person, but also make it quite clear that there are rules within that. And the rules are that if you want to stop at any point or you want to question what we're doing, that's okay. And that empowerment is incredibly important for a young person, particularly those that have been abused either physically or sexually or even emotionally, because what you don't want to happen in child protection is to relive the trauma that they have had before and the lack of trust in adults. So I think it's really important that you have a timeout, that sometimes that might mean your clinic overruns, and that's a challenge in itself. But you say it's okay, we're going to stop for a little bit, and it may be a brief stop for 5 minutes. It may be that you stop it there and then and regroup and bring them back another time. That's all dependent on what you're doing. Before I move on, I don't know how many of you have read this book by Lemon Cisse. He's an actor and he spent his life in care. And he was fostered by a family. And this is an incredibly powerful narrative of what it is like to be a young person in the care system who feels like they're not listened to. So if any of you, it's a bit depressing at times. So if you're feeling a bit fragile, maybe park it for a little bit. But I certainly think for me, this makes me even more passionate, because actually these young people and children are going to become adults one day, okay? And they're going to remember their interaction they've had with us, okay? We may not be able to solve everything, but the fact that we have listened to them in that moment in time is incredibly powerful, and do not underestimate it. So how can we do that within our interaction with young people? So build a rapport. So this is all embedded in everything we do, and we should be building rapport with young people and their families whenever we engage with them or whenever we have an interaction. It may be that you don't even go into why you're speaking to them initially. You just literally talk about their lives, or something really trivial, or about what they enjoy. Music is often a good one for young people, or YouTube. They all seem to be really savvy on YouTube at the moment and watching various videos. And certainly I know when I'm in ED at 3 in the morning and I've got a young person coming in with a mental health issue, I can spend a good period of time with them not even talking about why they're there. I just talk to them generically about things and build up a rapport, and they all laugh at me a little bit because my thing is a hot chocolate and sit with them at their level and just talk. I think it's also important to empower them about their own health. Okay, so tell them that you're going to examine them, you're going to listen to their chest, you're going to listen to their heart. For more younger people, I often say something like, I'm going to try and work out what you've had for breakfast, or something silly like that, or how much love there is in your heart for Frozen, if they've talked about Frozen, and little things like that. But also focus on positive things at the end. So say, I can see that you've got a really good healthy teeth. I can see that when I've examined your heart sounds nice and strong, your chest. So they come out of it feeling positive about something, because actually often in medicals we don't pick anything up. We might pick up some subtle things, but often it's a normal examination with kind of normal bruising, particularly in a child protection clinic where it's not an acute setting. So make them feel like they've come out of it with something positive. So I've talked about speaking alone. I'm very passionate about that. That can't happen with everybody, and I do want you to realise that you have to make a call on a case by case. For some young people, separating them from a carer or someone that's protective can be traumatic in itself. So I think you have to make a case-by-case decision on that. But the gold standard is to offer to speak alone. There will be seniors around in anything you do with child protection to talk that out with them. I'm not going to focus on heads today. And the reason I'm not going to focus on heads is, number one, this is supposed to be lightning teaching, but also number two, later on today, Sharice and Farah, who are incredible social workers that I've had the privilege of working with for a year, are going to talk about contextual safeguarding. And within that, they're going to focus on heads a little bit. But heads is a really, really powerful tool to really get an understanding of a young person's life, because it looks at home, education, it looks at social structures, it looks at various different things, which means you can get a really, really strong and powerful, almost 360-degree view of what this young person's life with. I also think it's also important to ask a young person or a child things they love in their life, they really enjoy about life. And often they will, a really young child will say, I love playing with my mum, or I love playing with my siblings. But then it might come up with things I wish I could change, might be, I wish I could play with them more, or I wish we had more toys, or I wish little things will come through about neglect and about this real home environment. The other things that might come out is how we often see in child protection medicals, parents are going through really bad divorces, and often your role as a professional is trying to work out whether the allegation that brings them here is true, or is it being fed by something. And actually what comes out often is that children are picking up on parental discourse way above what you might expect them to be at a young age. And they may say, I wish mummy would cry less, or I wish mummy didn't have to worry about where food was coming from. And that really gives a sense of what life might be like for this young person or child in their home environment. And I also think it's, and Alison Ward is really passionate about this, and she's, I've thanked her at the end of this talk, she's really embedded my view on this, about asking them if they feel healthy, and if they don't feel healthy, why they don't feel healthy. And that answer will vary according to, obviously, age, okay? So I remember meeting a young person who was in for a medical, and he was with a foster carer, and he was overweight. And he had incredible insight into the fact that he was overweight, and he had incredible insight into the fact that his grandma, who he was living with because his mother had a mental health issue and was in a was sectioned in an inpatient unit, and his father, whom he got sent away with, it was a really horrible story. So his father didn't feed him and hid food from him, and was very much used food as power. His grandma did the opposite. So his maternal grandmother, who was with, fed him a lot, and fed him so much so he put weight on. So he had incredible insight. He was 14, that his grandma did that to reflect love for him, and the guilt that they'd sent him off to his father, who essentially had starved him. But within that, he found it difficult to challenge grandma about portion control. So what we talked a little bit about, how maybe I would challenge grandma as the doctor and say, Grandma, we've heard your shepherd's pie is great, and he loves it, but actually a bit of pork, he's thinking about maybe changing this, how much he's offered. And he felt that was a really good idea, because then that meant it was my idea, not his. He also loved cycling, and he'd been given this new bike from grandma, but what grandma hadn't done was got him a cycle helmet and all the safety stuff. So the other thing I put in my report was, and I spoke to a social worker about it, is we found a charity, we did this in clinic, that would provide him with kind of a helmet, and we also found a local cycling club in Camden that he could join. So there are things that we can do as professionals, and there are things we can't do, but what we can definitely do is advocate and suggest and try and find solutions. And it's not always possible within the framework of social care, and sometimes I get a bit frustrated that we can't, but I think it's always worth trying, because it shows them that we're listening and that we care. And the other big thing I ask them is where they see their future going. And I think this is a really powerful one, because actually sometimes when you first meet a young person, it can be quite bleak. So in adolescence clinic, it's often in UCLH, we see a lot of young people with medically unexplained and chronic fatigue, and there is often an underpin of safeguarding concern going alongside that. And often when you first meet them, it's bleak, it's really depressing, it's like, I don't see a future, and it's all really horrible. And then you follow them up, and along with therapy and along with input, they may say, actually, now I feel ready to do my GCSEs. Or so I think somewhat documenting plans for future, I think, is really powerful sometimes to show us how this young person is viewing themselves. I think I've already listed this. Make the child's voice really paramount in the report you're making. It's super powerful when you go to strategy meetings or when you go to MDTs and you make it really clear how this child feels about or this young person. It's a really powerful narrative, and it's something that we're incredibly privileged to be able to put in my opinion. So for example, here's examples that I've put in reports before. Frankie's worried about his mother, who he feels is sad. This is a very young person. He wants to help her. So that's really kind of powerful that a child has told you that, okay? But also within that, something positive. He also wants to be a scientist when he's older and would like help in exploring his career, which sounds obviously really like, some might argue that's the role of a teacher, but that's not the point. And the point is that you've had a conversation with a young person or a child, and you've made it quite clear that you're going to put in what their voice is. It is so powerful, I think, and I think that's what Alison Ward and the Camden team is very passionate about. And they've done people have done audits in this work and looking at child protection reports, and it's incredible how this is often missed. So for many of you, this might sound bland or obvious, but it's something we're not necessarily doing. So my take-home messages within this kind of really quick run through of Voice for Child is be child-centered in all that we do. This crosses child protection, this is everything we do in paediatrics, but have professional curiosity, ask, engage, and really try and have an appreciation what life is like for that young person or child at home, okay? Be holistic. Children are more than just their child protection medical, they're more than just their condition. They are young, people within homes, within education settings, who have lives, who have lived experiences. Reflect that in your report writing, okay? And listen and report. Be that child's advocate. Put it in writing what their views are, what they have to say, okay? Make recommendations, okay? Some of the recommendations we won't be able to, it will be social care that has to take it forward. Some things we can change, like weight loss help, or bringing the young person back, or finding appropriate people for them to talk to take it forward. But do that and do it well. And it's so important that whatever we do, but in safeguarding in particular, you make that voice of a child really important, okay? And I want us all this week to really think about, in all the different talks we put together, what life must be like for young people within the themes that we've put through. I really, really want to thank here Alison Ward, who I've lucky I've worked with her twice now as an SHO and as a registrar, who's really super passionate about this theme and who's spoken at conferences and does an incredible training package looking at how to communicate with young people with videos. So a talk about this wouldn't be right without really flagging Alison here, who has made me even more passionate about it. Because it's lightning teaching, I'm going to end because I'm going to keep to time, which for me is a challenge in itself. But before I do, I just want to say that we have got a child safeguarding trainees group who, before COVID, we would meet once a month and talk about child protection themes, largely aimed at level 2 and level 3 trainees who want to do SPIN. And essentially, if you guys want to join that, email me and I will put you into our WhatsApp group. We're going to do a virtual group in the next coming weeks looking at child protection and safeguarding within COVID and how petrified we all are about the need that's gone up and the homes that children are living in, and the fact that education it's potentially can be quite bleak, but I think it's something that we're really, really passionate about. So please drop, if you're level 1 and you're really interested in child protection, it's not exclusively for senior trainees, so still email me, because we're really up for nurturing, and we've got a few new consultants who've just become consultants and registrars in the group who are super good at kind of directing us. So that's our group. We've got a WhatsApp group, we've got lots of chat going on at the moment. So I'm going to end there unless anyone's got any burning questions. Sveta's just put on her email address too. Susie, this is a great initiative. Thanks for including us, and I really like the idea of lightning learning. But if no one's got any questions, I'm going to end there. Keep being passionate about young people. They need us even more now, and young children, and never forget the voice of the child. Thank you, everybody.